Good evening and welcome. With Rabbi Yasker away as the chair of the Education Committee, I have been asked to share some brief welcoming remarks. This evening, we look forward to what will be, I am sure, not only an interesting, but an eye-opening presentation. Rabbi Yigal Kornblum, an active member of our Torah Or community, will introduce our speakers as he is far more familiar than I as to the purpose and goals of the Tirtzu organization. But if you were as shocked and as angry as I was when Amnesty International and later certain aspects of the UN claimed Israel to be an apartheid state or guilty of ethnic cleansing, you could not help but ask, where did they get such misinformation? Is there no organization within Israel that counteracts such misinformation? Our community, Torah Or, not only strongly supports Israel with members who live there part of the year, but also with children and grandchildren who work and study to help fulfill the Zionist dream of a Jewish state. This evening, we are one of the first congregations in the United States to hear firsthand the efforts Tirtzu uses in helping to combat those organizations in the US and in Israel that tear at the fabric of the Zionist dream of a Jewish state. It's now my pleasure to call on Rabbi Yigal Kornblum.
Thank you, Rabbi Green, and I would like to take this opportunity to thank all that participated in helping us to bring this about. Our president, of course, Dave Chancellor, Rabbi Green, Larry Fish, who is our tech expert here, and he will tell us how many the Zoom people we do hope. We have reached out to some of our members who have departed and went up north or east, wherever. So hopefully they are zooming in. Well, in a good way, in a good way. I know you have to be careful in this context. At any rate, I must confess that, like many of you, I didn't know much about Tirtzu. Fortunately, during a recent visit to Israel this past December, we had an opportunity to meet Matan and a colleague, Eitan. And upon hearing their valiant efforts, as Rabbi Green had mentioned, to offset the damage done to Israel's image by local leftist NGOs and others, I was determined as much as I could, in a small way, to try to raise their profile so people will know about them. So I'm not going to belabor the point here because you came here. You came to hear from the representatives of Tirtzu, not me. So there will be a presentation by the representatives, and then, of course, you'll have a chance to have a Q&A. So it is my pleasure, and indeed, we are honored that Tirtzu representatives chose to make this their first stop in the United States. We persuaded them to come to South Florida, and we appreciate the fact that they have come to join us. And I thank all of you who are here, obviously, because you are concerned about what is happening there, as Rabbi said. We have many Many of us have children, grandchildren there, and of course, we are concerned about Israel's image. So without further ado, let me introduce Mr. Douglas Altabef, Chairman of the Board, and Matan Peleg, the CEO of Tirtzu.
I'm going to try to do this without a mic, and you tell me if you can hear me or not.
Yeah, we can.
Very good. By the way, in Israel, they say, you know, you're off to a great start when you have to move the mechitza because you have that many people. So that's a good sign. No, lo shomim? Okay, then I will revert to the mic. Let's try the other one. How's that? Okay. First of all, I want to thank Igal for putting this together and of course the Beit Knesset for its hospitality and hosting us. And as your rabbi pointed out, this is a subject of great significance. It's a great subject that doesn't necessarily command the emotional attention that it needs to get, especially in the United States. In Israel, it's a very different story. All right. Okay. How's that? Thank you. And before we get into the discussion of the topic itself, first of all, some of you may have noticed from my tone of voice that I am not a native Israeli. I'm a native New Yorker who made Aliyah with my wife and our youngest child to Israel some 13 years ago. And in the course of planning to make Aliyah, I met the founder of this organization that's Tirtzu. Now, those of you who may not know, I think most of you do know where the name Tirtzu comes from. And of course, it is part and parcel of Theodore Herzl's very, very famous adage, Tirtzu, ein zu lo agada. And what Herzl was referring to is that if you will it, it is no dream that the idea of a Jewish state would be no dream. But our name comes from the reality that we believe the idea of Israel must be willed on an ongoing basis. In other words, you cannot take for granted what Israel is about. You cannot leave it in place and assume that by its own momentum, by its own energy, Israel will continue to be the magnificent place that it has become. It requires vigilance, it requires nurturing, it requires diligence. And so every day we believe that we must will the state of Israel into being in the fullest sense of the word. When I first encountered Tirtzu, I was told that, well, the mission of Tirtzu is to strengthen Zionism among Israelis. And I said to the founder, isn't that like telling someone that they should love their grandmother? Isn't that self-apparent? He said, no, it isn't self-apparent, because believe it or not, there is a great deal of anti-Zionism within Israel itself. And in fact, the story of the founding of Tirtzu addresses our topic tonight. The year is 2006, and as all of you know, Israel fights a very difficult war in Lebanon in 2006. And at the end of the war, many soldiers, having fought valiantly, having served their country, go back to their studies, resume or begin studies in various Israeli universities, the Hebrew University preeminent among them. And what many of those students were treated to were statements by professors in their classrooms: the army you just served in, the country that you just defended, was committing war crimes and crimes against humanity, and the country itself is a colonialist, usurping, occupying country. Now, put yourself in the shoes of someone who has just risked life and limb to sacrifice on behalf of their country. That's not something that went over very well. And very quickly, there was a reaction, a grassroots reaction, a reaction of individual students who came together and said, something must be done about this. This cannot stand, to quote a previous president of the United States. And the result was, in short order, organizing to band together to push back against anti-Zionist lies, claims, and libels against Israel. And that organization became Tirtzu. Now, Tirtzu started at one campus and has grown over the years to become the largest grassroots Zionist organization in Israel. And while the rabbi is right that we are not that well known yet in the United States, I want to tell you that we are a household name in Israel itself. We are very well known in Israel, and the reason is because of what we're going to talk about tonight. The willingness to fight the good fight, to stand up and say, contrary to what the demonizers want to say about Israel, Israel is just, Israel is humane, Israel is a decent society, and that needs to be not only known, but that needs to be broadcast all over the world. And that is our mission, and that is what we have been doing. We have become what I would call the mirror of the values of Middle Israel, of regular people, people like yourselves, people who get it, people who understand what the reality of the situation is. We reflect their values, we reflect their priorities, and we are not afraid to echo those values in the halls of power. We're not afraid to echo those values in the media, in academia, or anywhere for that matter, because we believe very, very strongly, as do you, in the great righteousness and the great miracle that is the state of Israel. So tonight we're going to talk about how BDS in Israel impacts BDS in the United States. And more importantly, or as importantly, what are we doing about it? What we at Tirtzu are doing about it. So you want to, I could do that. So, you know, there's this term that has become a much discussed term, BDS, boycotts, divestments, and sanctions. And the term is used probably to sugarcoat a certain reality. Let's be very candid what the reality is. The reality of BDS is not Israel should not be over here, settling over here, but maybe settling over here is okay. That's really not what BDS is about. BDS is really about, should there be an Israel at all? Should there be a Jewish Israel? And while we're at it, should there be something that used to be called Israel, but now will be something else? So BDS is code for delegitimization, denigration, demonization of Israel. And we pose the question here, are they the same? BDS in the diaspora, BDS in Israel, are they the same? I would suggest that they share the same goals. And ultimately that goal, as I said, is a delegitimization of Israel to the point where it is no longer recognizable as the sovereign state of the Jewish people. Now, in the United States, in Europe, people have no qualms about saying that. Go back to Poland, go back to Morocco, wherever you're from, this isn't your land. You took it from the Palestinians who are the indigenous people of the area, and they go, right to the end conclusion. The tactics, however, are different, because while people in the diaspora might say that, in Israel, it's very tough to say to your neighbor, you should be out of here, or you should be dead, or you should go somewhere else. So the tactic in Israel is, as the rabbi suggested, one of whether Israel should continue to be a Jewish state, as opposed to a state of its citizens. A state of its citizens would undoubtedly mean that it would be no Hatikva, there would be no Israeli flag anymore, there would be no calendar, a Jewish calendar that determines how the country lives. There would be no sanctioning of Judaism as the state religion. But you can't necessarily say that, as much as the demonizers in Israel would really like to say that. So they sugarcoat a lot of this with, a Jewish state is chauvinistic, a Jewish state is racist, a Jewish state is exclusionist, and how much more moral could we be if we were just one big kumbaya nation? So what we like to say is that BDS in Israel is the head of the snake of all BDS, meaning that it is in Israel, of all places, that BDS draws its most vital support. And the reason for that is, we like to say that unlike the old ad about Las Vegas, what happens in Israel does not stay in Israel. What happens in Israel emanates, is spread out throughout the world. And what happens uniquely in Israel is that Israelis use their status as Israelis to gain a false sense of credibility, a false sense of authenticity, and more often than not, a false sense of expertise. So that when an organization like B'Tselem shows up at the European Parliament to talk about war crimes, if you are a delegate from Estonia or from Denmark, or a country that doesn't necessarily have a very close relationship with Israel, and you're sitting there listening to testimony from an Israeli who's come all the way to Brussels to talk about what Israel is doing, isn't the logical reaction like, wow, he's really upset. He's really angry. He's come all the way here to share this with us. There must be a great deal of credibility to what he's saying. I better pay very, very close attention. Okay, this happens time and time again. The old joke in Israel is, if you are an Israeli academic and your career is going kaha, get on a plane, go to America, start bashing Israel, and you'll be invited to give speeches, to be on panels, to submit articles to journals. It'll be a real shot in the arm for your academic career, because people love to hear Israelis condemning Israel. It makes them feel really good, like, it's not just me. Listen to this guy, or listen to her, listen to what they're saying. So I must be onto something, right? So at this point, I'm going to ask Matan to do some of the heavy lifting to talk about what it is that we are doing about it. I think you folks have a very good sense of the problem, although maybe not the depth of the problem as it exists in Israel. But now we're going to talk about how we can address it. By the way, Matan, as you will notice from his accent, unlike me, he was not born in the Bronx. But
don't worry, they will not notice. Erev Tov, first of all, thank you very much for coming here, and I'm very thrilled. And now we try to, let's say that I'm not believe what I said, and I will try to prove what he said. First of all, the difference between BDS, international BDS, and delegitimization from within, BDS from within. As Doug said, the BDS international movement, it has one goal, that Israel will not exist. But the tactic is to convince all the countries in the world that Israel doesn't have a right to exist. Okay? That Israel is like South Africa in the apartheid days, right? It's very easy. We will convince all the colleges, we will convince all the states, we will convince all the people in the world that we must boycott Israel because it doesn't have a right to exist. If we will convince all the world, they will boycott it and it will collapse from within. This is what happened to South Africa. The leader, the founder of the BDS movement, his name is Omar Barghouti. He is Israeli. Okay, he made his PhD in Tel Aviv University. He understood. Now, as Doug said, it's not something, how can you talk about to the Israelis and say you don't have a right to exist? Well, I exist, how can I not? So the case is very hard to convince. So another tactic is to convince the Israelis that there is a problem in having a Jewish state. And what is important here to say is that this is not, as we will see in a second, this is not an authentic phenomenon. This is not a grassroots. It's the anti-Zionism, anti-Israelism that comes from Israel and later on lead the BDS movement and the anti-Israel movement around the world. Someone else is funding it. It's a very small minority, but because he has a lot of power and a lot of money, it's very vocal. Later on, we will also talk about what are we in Tirtzu doing about it. But first of all, for a second, we are taking the map of Israel, okay, as you see, and let's put here for a second the European countries, okay, 27, because Britain is out, yes, it was 28. 27 countries of the European Union, and let's start and let's make a game. This is delegitimization from within. There are organizations who claim that Israel is doing war crimes in Gaza, right? No, forget about that it was disengagement and we took 8,000 Jews out of Gaza Strip from Gush Katif. Forget about this. If there is an organization like Breaking the Silence, like Adala, like Mahsom Watch, if their claim is very, very simple, the Israelis are doing war crimes in Gaza. That's it. It's very easy. Then you can get millions of dollars from the European governments. Okay? And then those organizations, they write reports, they go to do tours of parliament members in Gaza Strip, they go to the United Nations, they go all over campuses in the United States, they also get money from European Union, by the way, and we showed it in our reports, that some of the money is to do world tours inside Jewish communities around the world, to say that we are doing war crimes in Gaza. Their benefit out of blaming Israel in making war crimes. It is not a coincidence, those organizations that they put here, all of them are organizations that were mentioned in the Richard Goldstone report that blame Israel in doing war crimes after caste-led operation. Amnesty just now did a report that blaming us in doing apartheid policy, right? We showed that 70% out of their footnotes in the report was based on Israeli organizations. Now, European Union and European governments, and I'm talking about governments, give also money to organizations that say that Israel is doing ethnic cleansing to Bedouins in the Negev. If you come and say, well, no, it's a little bit complicated, the Bedouins just starting to make villages that no one said that it's allowed to do a town here, a village there. If your argument is complicated, then you will not get money from foreign governments. But if your argument is very simple, Israel is doing ethnic cleansing to the Bedouins, and they campaign it, and they delegitimize our right for sovereignty in the Negev. For example, now we cannot even plant a tree in the Negev because it's almost, it will be intifada, right? It just happened a few weeks ago, right? If you saw, we wanted in Tu B'Shvat to plant trees in the Negev. The Bedouins came, they made a riot, and the government said, oh, it's too much for me, let's stop planting trees in the Negev. But the movement, the power that comes and make it such a big deal start with money that comes from foreign government. We say that the argument is very simple. Ethnic cleansing. And what is similar between war crimes in Gaza and ethnic cleansing, both of them are crimes against humanity. So if you're doing crimes against humanity in the Negev, it means you don't have a right to a place in the Negev. Now, if I will come to the Israelis and I will tell them, if they come even to myself and tell me, you don't have a right in the Negev, everybody will tell you, no, of course I have a right in the Negev. The Negev, Ben Gurion said, the Negev is ours, what is the problem? But when you measure it, if you test it, look at the bases, the IDF bases in the Negev. The Bedouins are coming, they steal, no one is doing anything to them. The problem of polygamia, one man, few wives, all the 30% of the Muslims in the Negev, Bedouins in the Negev, have a second and third wife that they buy in Hebron or in Gaza. No one is doing anything with this because those campaigns delegitimize our force to enforce the law. Judea and Samaria. Judea and Samaria. I just think about Judea and Samaria. What do I think? Oh my God, apartheid, two-state solution. No matter what. If the case is very simple, Israel is doing apartheid policy in Judea and Samaria, that's it. You can get in the club, and the club is the European millions of dollars that coming to those propaganda organizations. And now, apartheid policy, war crimes in Gaza, ethnic cleansing are all crimes against humanity. Now, ask so much Israelis, what do you think about Hebron? They will say, no, Hebron, it's a radical place. No one wants to be in Hebron. But at the end of the day, think about it. Hebron, they told that it's the Jewish quarter in Hebron is 3% out of the city. That's it. That's it. But when you put Hebron in Google, you can see like it's a apartheid state, ghost town, ghost city. And those are all of breaking the silence, all those propaganda organizations, again, the money comes from outside. They benefit out of the conflict. One of the things that they were exposed with the time, for example, is that sometimes the radical left pay money, okay, for doing a conflict. What do I mean? Sometimes the Ayosh, breaking the silence, they come with parliament members from Europe to see the occupation, to see how violent are the Israeli soldiers. But there is a problem. When they take the parliament members to see the Israeli soldier, well, the Israeli soldier doesn't do anything, he's not violent. So it's a problem because I'm a sightseeing, I bring tourists to see violent IDF soldiers. so was exposed that they give money before the parliament members from Europe come, they give money, cash money, to kids, to Arab kids, and then they start to throw stones on the soldiers, and then the parliament members from Europe can see, oh, you see it, the violent soldier is angry on the kids. Wow, what is that? Occupation. BDS tourism. Now, again, because of COVID-19 went a little bit down, activists from Europe, activists also from the United States come, BDS activists come to harass the soldiers in Hebron, in Judean Samaria, in Jordan Valley. Okay, those organizations bring them, sometimes they fund the groups who come here and host them. And again, I think there is a similarity between 18 years old Jewish student in university and 18 years old IDF soldier. The similarity is that both of them are good kids. Good kids. If I will come to a Jewish boy in Columbia University and I will tell them, yeah, you are an occupier, you are a killer, what the kid will say, you know what, leave me alone. I came to study because he's a good kid. If you're coming with a mobile, do like this to a soldier, how are you not ashamed? What are you doing? The soldier will not do anything. He's a good kid. If you're coming with a gun or with a knife, it's a different story. Not always, but it's a different story. But BDS, tourism of BDS, people are coming to Israel to harass soldiers and no one is doing anything about it. And the soldiers don't do anything about it also. Because it's not a gun, it's a mobile. They shame the soldiers and they put it on social media. And again, they benefit out of the conflict. Those organizations, they create an interest. And like this is in Jerusalem. Just a short story about Jerusalem. You heard about Sheikh Jarrah, Shimon HaTzadik? A short story. The argument, yes, the conflict about Sheikh Jarrah, Shimon HaTzadik is very, very simple. I don't know if we thought about it. It's very simple. Jewish people, they have houses, okay? The neighborhood Shimon HaTzadik in Jerusalem is from 1875. Okay, 1875, first year of this neighborhood. The Jewish, Sephardic Jews bought the land over there. Anyway, there is an argument. The Jews think it's their houses, the Arabs think it's their houses. Okay, I'm sure that even in Manhattan you can find the same argument between neighbors. This is my house. No, this is my house. But foreign governments gave money to NGOs who made profit out of make this small, non-interesting story an international crisis. By the way, we exposed that peace now got 250,000 shekels to do a campaign about Jerusalem and about Sheikh Jarrah. Now, why this is interesting? Because it happened before the last big round operation that was in Gaza that they shot to Jerusalem. But why it is interesting? In 2018, the United States government brought their embassy to Jerusalem. Okay? Peace Now didn't do anything about it. They post, we counted, they post 18 posts on Facebook about Jerusalem. And again, American embassy came to Jerusalem. It was big balagan, lots of violence in Gaza, big arguments, okay? But Peace Now, they didn't care. But in 2020, they got $250,000 shekels from the German government to make a campaign about Jerusalem, and suddenly Sheikh Jarrah became a serious problem. And so, such a big problem that Mohammed of the Hamas, when he shot the rockets to Jerusalem. He said, I'm calling the Jews to go out of Tirtzu. Tirtzu, a not interesting story, became an international problem. Now, I'm not saying that the fight started only because of peace now. There were more reasons, but this is a factor. This is something that you cannot ignore. The fact that foreign governments and propaganda organizations in Israel taking small arguments that no one cares about and make them international problems. Givat HaMatos, did you hear about the airplane hill, Givat HaMatos in Jerusalem? There is a place in Jerusalem no one cares about. The Jerusalem municipality want to go and build hill. It's in Jerusalem municipality area. But because Peace Now took in their hand parliament members from Europe to this hill, that's it. You cannot build there. Why? It became an international problem. This is a little bit about Jerusalem. Jordan Valley, the same problem. Golan Heights. Golan Heights, even few months ago, a Dala organization went to the United Nations to say that we are drilling oil that not belongs to us. We are stealing oil from the Syrian people. What is the Syrian people? There is a civilian war. They're killing one each other for almost 10 years. But now the problem here, and I'm running just because I think you got the point, is slowly, step by step, Israel delegitimized from within in every place, in every area, and it works. Look at again, look, and I measure it, what happened in the Negev. You cannot plant the trees, no one can enforce the law, because it's not very convenient. Maybe we did something wrong to the Bedouins, maybe we are not okay. The European Union also give money, of course, to the lecturers like this. Some of the heads, the leaders of those organizations are professors in Israeli academia. So maybe we are doing something wrong in the Negev, but maybe we are also doing something wrong in Gaza. Maybe if we, I don't know, disappear, maybe we were not criminals. Maybe something is wrong in Judea and Samaria. Maybe we need to take all the Jews out. Maybe it will be okay. Maybe we are occupiers in the Golan. Maybe if we would give the Golan, everything was okay and would be peace. Maybe we need to give Jerusalem. Like this, slowly, the confidence of Israelis in their own land become weaker and weaker. And we see it. We see it everywhere. Khan el-Akhbar, Khan el-Amar. Did you hear about Khan el-Amar? That, how do you say it? How do you explain it in English? Okay, Khan el-Akhbar. Khan el-Akhbar is a very small village outside of Jerusalem on the road to a village. 10 houses of Bedouins, okay? And they were built illegal. And it's on the road one. It means that when the people in Khan el-Ahmar want to go in the road of one and like to cut the capital of Israel, Jerusalem, from to the east, like no main road between the east of Israel to Jerusalem, they can do it in 1 minute because they're on the road. But Israel from 2009 is trying to take those 10 houses away. It's nothing, but we cannot do it. Why? Because like Tirtzu and like other places, foreign governments' involvement and propaganda organizations that made it like a place that every European parliament must come and look at Khan el-Ahmar and like this. And today, by the way, there are like thousands of Khan el-Ahmars in Judea and Samaria, in Area C, that even internationally they said that it belongs to Israel, it's our responsibility. And like this, they occupy land meter by meter, and there is nothing to do about it.
What are we doing?
And now let's talk about what are we doing about it. Because this is the battle of ideas, okay?
How simple.
If you have a right to a country.
Ah, ragazzi,
Now, because I think they are exhausted for my accent,
non
I
attivo.
will let you continue with the examples.
What Matan is saying that is very powerful is that there is a drip, drip, drip of delegitimization. And you can say, no, that's ridiculous, but we all know it's human nature. If you keep hearing the same messaging over and over and over again, you start to normalize. You start to say, gee, maybe I don't have it right. Maybe there is something more to this that I have to be thinking through. And so the key issue is who is going to give a counter who will be saying that Israel has no right, illegitimate. So the answer is, it falls to us. Inspiring our citizens to raise their voices. So here you see just a couple of, or more than a couple of pushback situations where we have raised the fact that there are Israeli academics who are urging foreign governments. I mean, this is like the stuff you can't believe this. You're a professor at Hebrew University and you're writing to the German parliament, please boycott my university, right? You know, it sounds like a bad joke. We got a huge amount of press for raising the fact that a professor at the at the Weizmann Institute, who is going to be awarded the Israel Prize, which is Israel's highest award to a citizen, had signed letters to the German parliament urging them to boycott and cut off funding, any funding to Ariel University. Why? Because it happens to be over the Green Line. So we said, how can you give the Israel Prize to someone who wants to put Israelis out of business, who wants to dislocate thousands of Israeli students? There's something profoundly wrong with that. And two ministers of education, because the government changed, agreed with us, and they denied this. Now they said, you're right, he's not getting the prize. Now, of course, this raises a huge hue and cry. Oh, it's freedom of speech, it's freedom of this. Trust me, if this were a right-wing nut who was saying things like, you know, shouldn't we be deporting all Arabs? There would not be the same hue and cry from academics saying he has a right to free speech. The sad reality in Israel, and you see it, of course, in the United States, is these freedoms are a one-way street. They are freedom for me, but not for thee. So we have undertaken several very, very interesting initiatives. You want to take this? Sure. No. By the way, this quote is Carmi Gilon, who was the director of the Shin Bet, wasn't necessarily a fan of ours, but he sees the impact that we are having. And he says, you know what? These guys are making a difference. So we're going to look at a couple of things that we do. Matan talked about the fact that you can harass soldiers. This is a very toxic thing because the purpose of harassing the soldiers is not to ruin the guy's day. It is to take a video clip, upload it on social media and say, aha, look at this. Look at what this guy is doing. He's harassing. He is doing something unspeakable. It's all Photoshopped, it's all editing, and it's very, very insidious. So what we have done, something very clever, is to say, you know what? Harassment is a two-way street. So at the same time that the anarchist from Denmark or Scotland is harassing the soldier, one of our activists is standing there with a camera in the face of the anarchist and saying, why are you here? What are you doing? What's your purpose in doing this? Stay away from the soldier. He's not harming you. Get out of here. This is our country. And it has been, not surprisingly, very effective.
But what also important is that when Doug talked about this, he talked about, in a way, he talked about our research division that is all about exposing those phenomena and to show if you are a professor and you're going around the world and bashing Israel, and this became your business. As we see it, our job is to expose it and to show the Israelis what are you doing, but that's what he's doing. But what is important is how we continue to give answers to it, to present answers to the Israeli society, because as we say ourselves, Tirtzu is not an organization. It's not 5 or 10 people in one office and that's it. It's a movement. It's a social movement. People, students, and other groups. So all the map, for example, that we talked before, here you see the present answers to every one of those phenomena. For example, as Doug said, filming the filmers. Let's start from here. First of all, we have 15 branches in campuses in Israel and 30 branches of post-academia around Israel. We are bringing Zionism and do Zionist activity in campuses and in general of Israel. Promoting Zionism again, educating to Zionism again. And why? Why is it important? Most of the Israelis are, the majority in Israel are rightists. Intuitively, everybody are Zionists. Most of them. But not a lot of people remember the story. They have the Zionist story is strong in their hearts. So it is important to wake it up. Okay, so this is what we're doing in our branches all the time, because as we know, Judaism has a brilliant mechanism. It calls vehigadeta lebincha. What does it mean? It means that if you need to give your son the story of the Exodus, right? You need to know the story. Okay? If I will not know the story about Moses, how can I tell it to my son? This is vehigadeta. Zionism doesn't have vehigadeta. So, and when you have anti-Zionist professors who create a new generation of teachers, and the new generation of teachers have totally ignorant, they are totally ignorant about Zionism, and they think it's racism, that's a problem. So who brings Zionism back to the campuses? In Tirtzu. This is the rationalism. But we also doing demonstrations to bring Zionism back to the game. For example, in campuses, every year there is like the Nakba demonstrations, right? Israel in the independence war, we did the war crimes, and now it's the Nakba, the disaster of the Palestinians. Oh my God, we stole the land. So every year we're doing also strong demonstrations like this, especially in Tel Aviv University, where Arabs from all over come to do like a Nakba, and we'll present Zionism, tours to Hebron, tours to Jerusalem. So we are not only trying to present answers to those challenges on the clouds, yes, but also on the ground. Take the people and bring them to the game, educate them to Zionism, encourage them to talk Zionism, to think about Zionism. And the best example from recent days, it's about what happening in the war in Ukraine and Russia, right? There is a war, and it's the first time since ever that the Israeli government, instead of thinking about how to save the Jews in a war, from a war zone, the government is talking about let's save the Ukrainians. It's very important to save the Ukrainians. Now this is what the media talked about. Let's save the Ukrainians. And then Tirtzu said, we also think the Ukrainians are someone need to save them. But what about the Jews? The Israeli public forgot about asked the most important question: what about the Jews? Before we started to save all the Ukrainians, let's talk about saving Jewish lives. What is the problem? And by the way, when we started it, we just spark with our activists. We just spark. Then all the people in the site began to. They supported our message that first of all, let's save the Jews. And it's amazing because we are Jews. We care about, we're really beautiful people, good heart. So, and tikkun olam, I don't know. So everybody said, yeah, but we are morals. We are morals. We must save the Ukrainians. And we said, look, do you really think the Japanese now have an argument in media about let's bring the Ukrainians and maybe the world will love us, the Japanese more? No one is talking like this. Only us, the Jews. But first of all, think about yourself. Think about the Jews. Okay, this is like anti-Zionism. When you don't have enough confidence and you think that you are a racist country, then you can promote those kind of craziness. But we would not succeed to promote those messages without the people on the ground, without the students. So it's very important to have the ideas and also the movement, the people. Doug, you want to continue or for the movie? Of the examples. You have the patience to look for something? Okay, very short one. We just want to show you what is a tourist group, a BDS tourist group who come to harass soldiers. This is we have tons of short movies like this. You can go to our YouTube and see, but this is one. Just an example. I hope it will work. Yes. Okay, so maybe this presentation it doesn't work, unfortunately. So anyway, okay, sorry. So what you see here is tourists who are in front of a soldier, and our guys, if the movie would show you, and our guy is like throwing them, but unfortunately, I will try later. Okay, Doug.
Is that the guy in the back in the hat? He's the one that takes films. He's Israeli. He films the soldiers reacting, and then he's paid like I saw the documentary. He's paid like thousands of shekels from all these organizations. To
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, it's great. It's a great gig. So we have here, these are just some relatively recent stories of things that we have been doing. It's interesting, we found out somehow it was leaked that there was a discussion, internal dialogue in the German government about who are these guys in Tirtzu. They're really giving us a hard time and it's really causing us a problem. So, this is when you're not having a great day and you want to think, am I really making a difference? And you see something like this, it really does make a difference. This is an amazing story here. We talked about academia. What we did a couple of years ago was to start a website called Know Your Professor. And what Know Your Professor is, many of you might remember, or your kids will tell you, that in universities in the United States, they have like course guides. You know, if you're thinking of taking Professor Smith's history class, you have to know that he's dull as dishwater, okay? And he'll just drone on, and so you might want to take someone else's class. What we did is to compile a compendium of professors who are anti-Israel. So if you're thinking of taking a politics class with Professor Cohn, know that he has signed petitions calling for the boycott of Israeli institutions. Know that he supports a BDS. Know that what he's about, because you may very well get harassed in his classroom. And this has become a very viral resource in Israel. It has been looked at hundreds and hundreds of thousands of times by Israelis. There are now, sad to say, 167 professors who qualify for this. We're not saying fire these people. We're saying just know what you're dealing with. It's caveat emptor, buyer beware. These are people who are very likely to get a narrative that might be very hard for you to endure. So it's a very important initiative, and one that should be done here, all right? We've had discussions with friends in the States about, why don't you do the same thing here? Now, maybe because the answer would be, instead of 167, there would be 167,000, and that's a problem. But I talked about the Israel Prize that was not given to a BDS professor. This is like a mosaic of articles. There's constantly things that we are doing. We have a very important research division that is looking into the links between anti-Zionist organizations and foreign governments, anti-Zionist organizations and the New Israel Fund. And once upon a time, these organizations were thought to be human rights organizations. And when we broke the story 7 years ago that they're getting all their funding from European governments, a light went on in our country. The citizens suddenly understood, wait a minute. These guys are really basically agents. They're foreign agents. They're water carriers for European governments who cannot make headway one-on-one with the Israeli government. So they're trying to do an end run around Israel's government to see, well, let's get some Israelis in here and maybe they can do our bidding for us. And so these organizations fit that bill. And now that our citizens understand what the drill is, they have very, very little imprimatur. They have very little following in Israel, but they do, as Matan pointed out, they have enormous amounts of money. So a lot of this boils down to, if there is a drip, drip, drip of delegitimization, there has to be a drip, drip, drip to counter it, a drip, drip, drip of affirmation, of love, of validation, saying, no, those who are attacking you have an agenda. The agenda is a malicious agenda. And contrary to what they are saying, we have the high ground. We are doing the right thing. We're not perfect, okay? But we are doing the right thing. And so, you know, Matan raised the issue of Sheikh Jarrah. This is like a bad joke. Sheikh Jarrah is like, has all the excitement of landlord-tenant law. Okay, that's what it is. It's a landlord-tenant issue, but it has been wrapped up and made into a cause. And you can make anything into a cause. And the sad reality is, if you don't have people saying, you know, this is nonsense, this is ridiculous, there's a greater willingness to believe the cause that you are promoting. So I would like to just conclude by saying that Tirtzu is a small organization, but on the ground, we are huge. And, you know, pre-COVID, maybe 6,000 to 7,000 volunteers interacted with us in one or another of our activities every year. That's a lot of people in Israel. And because there's a lot of people involved, we get a lot of media attention. Because we get media attention, we get governmental attention. And Tirtzu has been instrumental in bringing certain issues to people, friends of ours in the Knesset, and saying, we've got to do something about this. Here's a small example. A few years ago, 2 soldiers came into our office and said, I was denied service at a restaurant because I showed up in uniform. Wow. Wow. One was at an Arab restaurant in Haifa, one was at a Jewish restaurant in Tel Aviv. So we said, we don't believe it. We said, let's go and look. So we went back and we looked, meaning we came with the guy's uniform and again, denied service. So we took it to a friend in the Knesset, and 6 weeks later, there is a law that says you cannot deny service in a public accommodation to someone in uniform. Okay, that's not earth-shattering perhaps, but a lot of what we do is to make sure that we are not only talking the Zionist talk, but walking the Zionist walk. We're focusing on issues that should be, and we think are, of critical importance in day-to-day living in a Jewish and democratic country, in a Zionist country, to make sure that we are really being true to ourselves. One problem we have in Israel, and I've written a lot about this, is what I would call Galut syndrome. You know, we have to be more Catholic than the Pope. We have to be better than everyone else, and therefore we're subject to a double standard all the time, and we buy into a double standard all the time. But one of the things, and I see it with young Israelis, and thank God for young Israelis, is they say, no, we're doing the right thing, but we don't have to be held up to a standard that no one else in the world could possibly be held up to, or would want to be held up to, or would even abide by. And so why do we have to do that? Why do we have to live that way? And so a great deal of what we are about is reminding our fellow citizens, you're not in this to become beatified. You're not going to become a saint. What you are in it for is to be a good Jewish Israeli. You're in it to be a good, decent, moral human being in your land. And that is, that sounds very straightforward, but on the ground, day to day, that's not necessarily an easy message to both internalize and to live by. And so what I will close by saying what I say every year to our annual gatherings, that if Tirtzu did not exist, Israel would have to invent it. We're very happy to take questions. Yes, ma'am.
You gave us all the information now. What do we do?
Well,
In other words, what they want to know,
yes.
we clap for a reason. This is not a fundraiser, but I'm sure as we experience now, in any way that we can support it, by all means, go look about it. So how do people who do want to support it financially? I think that's what the question, right, Shirley?
All right, so besides, right here, and there are some flyers in the back that you can take. We have a very significant website in English, and it will allow people to donate. By the way, one of the things that we're very proud of is that we now have tens of thousands of Israeli donors. Right? The knock used to be, oh, you come to the United States because Israelis don't support organizations, right? No, that's no longer the case. Israelis now have some money in their pockets, and we're not talking about necessarily huge donations, but we're talking about a lot of people say, I want to be part of this. I want to support you, and you are encouraged. Visit our website, mt.org.il. You can make a donation. It's tax-free in this country. It's because you can make it to various 501c3 organizations that will support us. But a large part of this, and the real reason we are here, is to raise our visibility, raise the consciousness of among our friends in the United States that Israel is under internal attack in many respects. And it's incumbent on all of us, Jews everywhere, to be aware of that and to support Israeli efforts to strengthen Israel, because strengthening Israel only strengthens you. Strengthening Israel strengthens Jews everywhere. I'll tell you a little story. This was an amazing thing. We were in Florence, Italy. I went to shul on Shabbat. The synagogue in Florence is magnificent. You could shoot a cannon through it for the number of Jews you would hit. You won't hit any, but you have to go through a metal detector manned by Italian soldiers, okay? So it just so happens there was a bar mitzvah, so there was a minyan, thank God. And the rabbi at the Torah service says in English, he said, you know, we know why we're able to be here today. Okay, we know why we can come together and have this minyan. And I'm thinking he's going to give a shout out to the soldiers who just processed my talit bag. He said, it's because of the IDF. It's because of the Israeli army that we here in Florence can be proud Jews. And when I heard that, I started to cry because I said, he got it. And that's exactly what Tirtzu's mission is. We strengthen Israel, and by strengthening Israel, we strengthen you. Yes, ma'am.
My question is a two-part question. First of all, absolutely agree with you. We're as strong as Israel is, and we have to support Israel in every way. Number two, my question is like BDS movement that is in America. There are some businesses that support the
Yes.
BDS movement.
Yes.
I would like to know, and I tried to find it, which are those businesses, so that we can spread it and share it, so people, Jews, Israelis, those who support Israel would not buy from these companies. I think it's very, very important to bring this awareness. Do you have it on your site?
We do not, because we stick to our knitting, which is Israel. But there are organizations, good organizations like Camera, which pay a lot of attention to things like this, right? And I don't think it would be hard to find people who would say, you know, Unilever, you've got to, you know, because of Ben and Jerry's, whatever it is. And it's important. You're absolutely right.
Then another question, maybe it's my, I left Russia 50 years ago, but maybe it's my Soviet upbringing that makes me tough. I don't know. But I don't understand for the life of me how Israeli government allows these people who come from abroad, we know everything about everything, to come into the country to do this type of activities, and why they don't arrest those people who harass soldiers.
So the question was, why does the Israeli government allow things like the harassment? And by the way, we have contended a lot with the IDF, with senior brass, about why do you have a protocol that will endanger a soldier? And sadly, the answer, I think, is what I refer to as Galut syndrome. We have to be more Catholic than the Pope, and that's a bad analogy here, But you know what I'm saying? We have to do things that are self-destructive in the name of being sanctimonious. And I don't have a good answer for you. And it's a mindset that needs to change.
And the laws. I think that the way in America, the laws can be passed by majority vote, the same should be in Israel. They should not be undermining of soldiers.
Absolutely,
risking their
absolutely. We're
lives.
100%. Yes, ma'am.
She said, I want to expand upon. We went into great depth about the European Union and the effect, with the EDS movement of some of
Can you
those.
come up with, everybody can hear you because it's very hard.
I'll repeat your question. It's okay.
So the government, the Israeli government, what role does the Israeli government have in response to the foreign governments coming in? And,
That's a great question. What role, Matan, do you want to discuss that? Because you have a lot of discussions with ministers about what they do or don't do in terms of European government finance. Yes.
Well, our government is between not doing anything to cry a little bit about it. And that's it. A short story. One time we tried to convince one of the politicians in Israel to promote a stronger law about those organizations and to tax them. Because if you're a non-profit, you have like your tax deductible and stuff. We said, look, if the German government is funding this organization, why the Israelis need also to fund it? And then he said, look, the Knesset advisor, the legal advisor of the Knesset, he doesn't like those kind of bills, because sometimes parliament members come to here, to the Knesset, and they're looking at our bills, and they're getting angry when there are bills like this, so he doesn't want it. So I said, wait, Israel is an independent country, no? Why do we care about European Parliament members? Who are they? And they were like, yeah, I know what to do. So unfortunately, there are not enough laws against it, because the Knesset members, a lot of time they're afraid. And we hope it will change. At the end of the day, all the transparency laws that passed until now did some kind of change, but not enough. There's a lot of things to do.
Yes, sir.
Israel may have its faults, but, and we may be demonized, but every time there's a problem in the world, there's a disaster, Israel is there. All the things that Israel contributes technologically, medically, and so forth. How could anybody in their right mind think that a country that goes all over the world to help other people is an apartheid company? Why can't we publicize what we do that just demonstrates that we're not what everyone says we are?
Well, let's share a little secret together. The world, most of the world really doesn't like Jews very much. And, Matan and I were in Miami Beach this morning, and we drove past the Surfside disaster site. And I know Golan Vach, who headed the Israeli effort here, which was very instrumental in finding people in the rubble. I mean, an amazing effort, an unbelievable effort. We don't have a great answer for that, because you know what, this is our God-chosen destiny. We are a people apart. We are marching to a particular drumbeat, and it has not succeeded in making a lot of friends for us in many places. But having said that, there are a great many people who do respect what we do, and you know this from being parents and grandparents. When your children respect themselves, the people around them are going to respect them all the more.
Yes.
So a lot of this is driven by our own self-image, our own self-respect. And that's what we're talking about tonight, strengthening the fiber, the backbone, the spirit of Israelis to say, we are a very good place. Yes, of course we have problems. Who doesn't have problems? But we are trying to do the right thing. Our hearts are in the right place. Our efforts are in the right place and in the right direction. Yes, ma'am. No, no, yeah. No, I meant the woman behind you.
First of all, thank you and God bless you for your efforts. I read recently online that the United States State Department had issued a tender and
Yes.
seeking organizations
Yes.
to report on
Right.
human rights abuses in Israel and Gaza. And I very much fear that that's just going to lead to more of these organizations. And now, instead of adjusting the European Union, now the current administration is going to become more anti-Israel.
She said we need to update our presentation.
Yeah, yes, it's called Be Afraid, Be Very Afraid. No, and by the way, those organizations that they're thinking of funding are the exact same ones we're talking about. So that is, I don't want to get into a political discussion, but that's a very depressing reality. You're absolutely
Yeah,
right.
the State Department, people who run the State Department are Jews in some form.
Yes, well, that's right.
Only introduction.
So it's just that.
Right. Yes, sir.
So the organizations and the left in general tends to ennoble indigenous people, right?
Right.
Right, so Jews are the indigenous people of
Right.
Israel, right? Now.
Well, that's your narrative.
That's my. What I'm saying is that is there a way to sort of throw that back on them? In other words, if they're going to say that, in other words, there are actually criteria for determining who is indigenous
Yes.
in a certain area.
Right.
And can you speak to that a little bit?
Right, okay, so you make a very good point. So let's, obviously, there is the Tanakh, okay, and there is, but we also, and one of the things that Tirtzu has done, and we didn't talk about it tonight, but we partner with other organizations to do conferences. For example, we've done several conferences about the Balfour Declaration, about the San Remo Declaration, about the partition discussion and vote. In other words, to find the basis, to identify and discuss the legal bases for Israel's sovereignty. And much of that legal basis harkens back to the reality that Israel is, or that Jews are the indigenous people of the land of Israel. Now, sad to say, this is like, we live in a world where, certain people get the rights to being indigenous and they get all the, victimization points, and other people are deemed to be the privileged points, so they don't get to invoke that. But you're absolutely right, and we do make that point a lot. And we do try to educate a lot that Israel is, that the Jews are the indigenous people of Israel. And when we've had the effrontery to say that historically there's no such a thing as a Palestinian people, right? Until Israel was independent, a Palestinian was a Jew who was living in this Palestinians.
Both my parents are Palestinian.
Right.
And I was born in Israel.
Right.
And I was a
Right.
result of Palestinian.
Right.
My grandparents are Palestinian.
That's right. So, but so we, there's a lot of double speak, there's a lot of inversion.
I have their birth certificate. I have their tattoo.
Right.
It says Palestinian.
Right. You are a wonderful, wonderful audience, and you're, I'm quite sincere about that. Your passion for Israel is really commendable. We'll stick around for a few minutes, But thank you so much for coming tonight.
Thank you. I failed to thank another person who was instrumental in putting this together, Willie Hoffman, who is not here. Thank you, Willie. Now,
By the way, in answer to this lady's very good question, we would love to have an email address for you so we can send you information. We can put you on our mailing list so you can get an ongoing stream of information from us. So Matan has a book up here. If you wouldn't mind giving us an email address or a phone number or both, we'd love to stay in touch with you.
all right, I think with Doug and Matan's permission, we will deputize all of you to be good ambassadors for Tirtzu. Because now, I don't think if somebody asks you about Tirtzu, who are they? We know who we are. Thank you.